Hello, and good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon your time zone. Welcome to our webinar, Health and Healing Through Writing and Remembering. I'm Beth Carpin. I'm going to be your host and one of the speakers for today's webinar. We have a wonderful topic, and thank you all for joining. I see we have a nice crowd and some folks still coming in. The format for today's webinar is going to be a little bit different than we've done in the past. Today we're going to do more of a discussion session. And we're going to be sharing with you some research as well as some real life experiences and examples. And we hope that you'll actually contribute to the discussion as well. By asking questions, sharing your experiences, whatever you can contribute to the conversation. And you can do so by typing any questions or thoughts into the GoToMeeting interface. You'll see a spot on there where you can put in questions, or you can raise your hand. And we're going to try something a little bit different today. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not, so bear with us. But if it does work, we might try to unmute you and you can speak aloud rather than just typing in and us reading your questions. But we'll see how that goes. Anyways, with that, let's go ahead and get started, and I will introduce our lovely panel. So I already mentioned myself. I'm Beth Carpin. I am the CEO and co-founder of JamBios. JamBios is our sponsor today for this webinar, and is a free platform for those of you who don't know for writing and remembering and saving your memories and your life stories. I've also worked in the field of human resources development for the past 20 plus years. And do a lot of research, reading of academic studies, and that sort of thing. So I've applied some of that to our topic today. Also with us, all the way from the UK, is Sue Letchford. And Sue is a life coach. She has worked extensively with people with addictions, which often stem from traumas. And she teaches therapeutic writing to groups of her clients. She's also a hypnotherapist. She's a Reiki master. We'll have to learn more about that later, maybe. She's been writing and journaling since her teens. And a little anecdote that Sue didn't know I was going to mention, but she was also the winner of our Memory of the Week activity that we had a couple of years ago with our spokesperson, the wonderful Henry Ian Cusick, who some of you know. So welcome, Sue.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us, many of you know Sunshine Cowger. I always pronounce your name wrong. That's fine, you got it right. Sunshine, as probably many of you on this know, is JamBios activities coordinator. She also helps with client service. She is a writer. She has written how many books?
26 with 3 of them published.
26! Okay, she is a writer. I guess my anecdote for Sunshine is we first met Sunshine when she wrote to JamBios a nice letter that she sent to us about how much JamBios meant to her when she first found us. And things carried on from there, and we loved her so much we hired her. So thank you for joining us. Welcome, Sunshine.
Thank you, and now I'm in Hawaii, so I love it.
A little perk of the job. Okay, so we will get started with this. So can writing really heal? So when I first heard this, I was actually really kind of skeptical. I'm just maybe a little skeptical in nature anyways. And I wasn't really sure if that could be a real thing or if that was just something, people tried to tell you to sell books or whatever. When we started JamBios, it was really, we were focusing more on the fun and the joy and the enjoyment of reminiscing and revisiting your memories and saving your family stories and all of that. And shortly after starting, when a lot of users are coming in and people were contacting me and letting me know how it was really helping them from a therapeutic standpoint and health and wellness and all these things. And I thought, wow, this is something I really didn't know about. This was a few years ago. And so I started doing what I do, which is delving into the academic research, and just stunned to find out that there are more than 200 different studies, really rigorous academic studies on how writing therapeutically in a certain style can impact health and wellness. So it just was a really fascinating topic, and we're going to do a nice introduction to the whole topic today. So when you walk away from this, I think you're going to really have a good sense of how this works and how you can use it in your lifetime. I do want to ask Sue and Sunshine about your kind of introduction to writing as a method for healing and health and wellness. Maybe start with Sue.
Yeah,
How did you come across this?
the very first time I used writing therapeutically, I was 13. I'd had 2 dates with this boy that I really liked, and he asked me to meet him for a 3rd date, and then he didn't show up. And I went back home, and I was absolutely devastated, and I was crying, but it was more than that. I felt overwhelmed because I'd never had these feelings before. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was almost frightening, the intensity of how I felt. And possibly in years in the future, I might have chain smoked my way through a couple of packets of cigarettes, but I didn't smoke. I didn't do anything like that. And I just literally did not know what to do. And I picked up a notebook because I was always writing little short stories. I loved to write. And I kept a journal, but it was always things like, got up, played out, had tea, went to bed. I never shared my feelings in my journals. But something made me pick this book up and a pen, and I just started writing about how I felt, and the words just came pouring out. And by the time I finished, yeah, I was still upset, but I didn't have that panicky, overwhelmed feeling anymore, because all those thoughts that were running around my head, they were all safely now written down in my book, and I was able to reread them and get some perspective on the whole thing.
Wow, that's fascinating. And at such a young age to be able to experience that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sunshine, how about you?
I was just about the same age. I had actually started writing when I was 9, but it was more like my own creative stuff. However, with therapeutic writing, it happened when I was 12, and my brother had died. And I remember it happened during the month of December when he passed away. It was December 16th. And everybody was very gung-ho for Christmas and excited, and I felt none of that. I felt very broken and not knowing how to cope. And my background with my family at that time, it wasn't in such a place where there was a whole lot of support on how to deal with that, which I'm sure many of you are either have dealt with it or might be dealing with now. And for me, it was, it was just about getting out those feelings, about Brent's hat, still sitting in his room, and the fact that he was never going to come in and pick it up, or his set of drums sitting in the corner and knowing that he was never going to annoy me again by playing them, and getting all those things out. And just, and it really, truly, it took a little bit of time, but it really did start to help me.
Amazing. The two of you were so natural with falling into this, as opposed to somebody telling you to go do it. It
Right.
just kind of happened for you, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
I think, too, it might be because we were just so creative, naturally, both of us.
Both of you are
Yeah.
right.
I know it changed the way I journaled after that. Instead of just writing what I had for tea, I would write my feelings all the time. I think it really helped me get through some difficult times as a teenager.
Interesting, yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the scientific results. And again, we're talking, this subject, luckily, has been studied in so many different ways, shapes, and forms that we have a lot of knowledge on this through very rigorous studies of control groups and the whole bit. And so up on the screen, you'll see some of these. Really, to me, I was just shocked as each study after the next would just surprise me of how much it impacted. And, it started, of course, with reducing stress and anxiety, which I think is sort of the obvious one that we associate with something like when we think about a topic of therapeutic writing or therapeutic anything, we'll often think of stress and anxiety. But then to look deeper into the studies or broader view of studies and finding the immune function. I mean, they literally found in drawing blood that greater amount of white blood cells for those who were doing the writing therapeutically versus other kind of writing versus nothing, things like that. And then the doctor visits, colds and flus, they particularly found for upper respiratory, I don't know why, but for upper respiratory issues, fewer doctor's visits. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And I think when we were talking the other day, Sue, was it you that said something about, what was it you said? You said something about your gut and holding?
Yeah. Well, your gut holds everything. So when you're dealing with those things, a lot of people will be very tense. So I just wanted to mention the asthma thing as well. So a lot of times the reason people breathe better is because they tend to feel like they're holding their breath all the time when they're dealing with stress or anxiety. They're constantly holding their breath. So as they're letting go of that stuff, they're not doing that quite so much anymore. So yeah, because everything's held in your gut, though, going back to that, it messes with people so much that people have had to take leave of absences or even quit jobs because they're not functioning because they're so overly stressed and full of anxiety.
So did you have anything you wanted to share on any of these science stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that list, you think, well, that's a lot of claims. But then again, as Sunshine was saying, if you just look at that first thing on the list, stress affects all of your body, it affects all these things on the list. And we're living in a world right now that's so fast paced. We're actually under more stress than we've ever been. And I think we sometimes tend to think of people dying from stress because it is the biggest killer, that all these people are walking around with really high blood pressure and having heart attacks. But it's more subtle than that, because the stress hormone cortisol affects every part of your body. And as far as writing, therapeutic writing, helping stress, I mean, it's a very mindful activity. Mindfulness is a big thing at the moment for helping with stress. But as well as being mindful, what it's got above it, other types of mindful activities, such as meditation and yoga, is that you're actually dealing with the thing that might be causing you stress at the same time.
Absolutely. I was just going to say real quick, and I made this joke yesterday, but not to brag, but I've had a lot of health issues, but I am, on my second kidney transplant right now, and I spent 4 years in a dialysis chair. And I can honestly say that when I allowed therapeutic writing to really be something I focused on, I would say easily 3 times a week I was writing, if only for 15, 20 minutes a time. And it's because I was doing that writing that I was probably one of the happier people sitting in the chairs, and I was able to accomplish things that most people can never accomplish when they're on dialysis. And that being said, very quickly, that most people, when they go into dialysis, they don't feel good at all. Like even going grocery shopping or taking a shower or any of that stuff is very hard to even think about. And it was because of that stuff I was able to go and get my black belt through Taekwondo. I was able to homeschool my son. I mean, there was a lot of benefits, and I truly, absolutely believe that so much of it had to do with therapeutic writing.
you have dealt with a lot and with so much grace and positive attitude and all of this stuff. And it's interesting how writing has played a role in that, and certainly seeing this in the scientific studies, which I never would have believed these things if I didn't just read articles about them. I went back to read the actual research from the research because I just couldn't even believe that writing could do this, and then to see that it can. And just real quickly, because I know we want to move on to like what is this? How do I do it? How do I write this way? And some tips for all of that we're going to get into. I did want to just really briefly mention the last one on here about work performance, only because I've worked in human resources for so many years, so it was fascinating to find out that it actually impacts your work and your productivity and going into an interview and getting that job offer and increasing for students who perhaps.
Okay, can I just say one thing very quickly, because I know you want to move on, but I really want to say that when it talks about reduced work errors, improved chances of getting hired, increased grade point average, I really feel like when you're letting go of all this stuff that has held you down for so long, that once you're letting go of that, your self-esteem moves. It's more. You have more of it. So I think that's why you can go in and you're not so scared or full of stress and anxiety, and you are more confident to be able to look that employer in the eye and to believe that you can have that job.
Such a great point. It's hard to be confident when you've got some stuff going on in the background. Okay, so what is therapeutic writing? So what I'm going to go over next is it's kind of like the textbook way that the studies have shown provide maximum benefit. And then we might talk about I don't know where the conversation's going to go, but depending upon what Sue and Sunny want to share about whatever form of therapeutic writing they've used, we'll be interested to hear that as well. So the specifics from the researchers would describe it like this. And it really starts with the concept of writing really from your emotions and not like your deepest emotions, those things that are really inside of you. And it's writing about a particular event as opposed to just writing. Journaling is great, and journaling has shown to have some degree of health and wellness benefits, not as strongly or not as many benefits as this sort of therapeutic style. But in a journal, you might be just sort of writing about what's happening or maybe how you feel on a particular day or whatnot. When you are writing for therapy or for health and wellness, it's really exploring a particular event or something in your life that, going to the next bullet there, that's something that feels traumatic for you. And I particularly put the "for you" in parentheses because if you say the words out loud, these things might not seem that traumatic to someone else, or you might think it might not seem traumatic to someone else. And you might think about like, well, other people have things that are so much more traumatic, and I'm going to have Sunny talk about that in a minute. Well, hold on for one moment. And then, because we talked about this the other day, and she said something really interesting. But if you put it in words and it doesn't sound like, oh, well, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if it is a big deal for you, that's what you should be writing about.
Right.
Sunny, do you want to share what you said to me the other day about?
Yeah, I'm not going to share the person's name, but there's someone in my life that, as they were growing up, they were constantly told by their parent that, suck it up. There's people out there that have it worse. It's not that big of a deal, and basically making them feel bad about their thoughts. And then at one point in time, the same person was on Facebook, and there was this meme, and it said, you can tell people not to be sad because something, there's people out there that have it worse. Because that's like telling someone they can't be happy because somebody out there, you know, is happier. And so, like I was saying yesterday when we were going through a few things, is that, you know, what I may have gone through or what Sue or Beth may have gone through, it doesn't negate what you have gone through. And you have every right to feel like something's traumatic just because somebody else may have gone through something that may seem a bit more difficult.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, you know, it's all on a scale of what's traumatic and what's not. But if it's impacting you or you've been thinking about it or it bothers you or you feel like it impacts your life, there you go. And just moving down on the screen there, your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions, and really kind of delving into some of those things that often we push to the side and we don't want to get into those. So I'm going to ask you to talk about this in a moment, but I'll only just finish the bullet points. For a continuous period of time, we'll talk about best practices of how much time works best, but it is sitting down quietly for a continuous period of time and continuing to write for whatever that period of time is that you're going to do. And I think the last bullet is just really important too. Don't worry about sentence structure, grammar, spelling. None of that matters. This is more about what you have to say and get out. So I'm going to sort of sum it up the way I sum it up on this next screen, and then I want to hear from Sue. For me, as I started learning more about this, I realized that what this therapeutic writing, expressive writing, it has a lot of different names, but really what it is, it's about writing from your heart. Sue, any thoughts that come up just from some of the stuff we just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I do therapeutic writing groups at work, and the first thing clients say to me when I mention it to them is, I can't write. And I think Sunny said something interesting before when she said, oh, Sue and I were probably quite creative anyway, and that was why it was a natural outlet for us. So I take it for granted that I've always written, and writing is quite easy for me. But I think a lot of people, their experience of writing is solely confined to writing academically, writing at school or college. And if perhaps, you know, people aren't confident with their spelling, their punctuation, their grammar, and they've always had to write to a certain standard and being, you know, had their mark worked down by teachers, they do come away with this feeling that I can't write. So I would say it's not about that. It's as you say, writing from your heart. And I say, if you can communicate using words in speech, then you can communicate your feelings onto a piece of paper. So it's kind when people start doing that, then this is what we do. And it's just something that people aren't used to doing.
Really great point.
Yeah,
really
I love
good
it.
point. Sunny, I think you had something on the screen that...
Well, this picture, like, I'm not even the one who chose this picture, but when I saw that it was part of the webinar today, I just felt like it was so important to mention. So one of the things I used to fall into as I was growing up is I always kind of believed it was up to somebody else to make me happy. And when I saw this picture, and it's their own hands holding the heart up to their chest, it reminds me that we are responsible for our healing, that it's not up to somebody else to heal us. And that's where therapeutic writing for me really came into play, because regardless of what my mother had done or what, you know, the fact that my brother died the way he did or the fact that my father was murdered, it was up to me to go through the healing process. And that's what this picture means to me.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that, both of you. So optimal methodology. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I like to really figure out what is the best way so that you get maximum benefits. So in studying the various ways and various approaches, I'd like to share with you what has been distilled in terms of how to get the most benefit. And a question that comes up a lot is, should this be handwritten, or can it be typed? Does it have to be on a piece of paper? Can it be in a computer? And I actually thought that the research was going to say that it needs to be handwritten. I don't know why. I feel like there's this connection between your hand and writing and your brain and all of that. But the research was all very clear that typed is fine. Typed in a computer is fine. And they would actually do studies where they'd have one group do on a piece of paper, one group do on a computer, all different ways to do it, and the results were the same regardless. So I think that was a very, very clear results for that. Timing-wise, they suggest going for about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes of even, setting a stopwatch or a clock if you want to keep writing. Sometimes it takes a bit for you to get to the open your heart when you're doing that writing. And as you keep going, you might find that you're getting more and more out. 3 to 4 sessions, so they really want you to explore whatever this topic is more than just once. And I know with JamBio, for those of you who use JamBios or want to use JamBios, we can set up it as chapters and sections and things like that. And often we'll have one section and we'll just write it. And this research is suggesting to actually explore the more traumatic events of your life over more than one session. I thought was interesting. Resisting the urge to be detached. I found this one kind of fascinating because they said it's very, very common for people at the outset to start to kind of write this academic dissertation or start to find relevant quotations from famous people to add that are related to it. And as Sue brought up, which I think is such a great point, is that our experience with writing is generally in the form of you're required to write a paper for a class or for work or for something. And when you write, that might just be your natural mode. So I thought that was such a great point of Sue's, that to kind of get out of that space that you may be used to for writing and be able to be more open with yourself. And, ultimately writing personally, we've already talked about this last bullet point, your deepest thoughts, your emotions about that event. I'm going to talk in a sec about what to write, like some ideas to give you some help with I don't even know what to write. I know what event, but I don't know what I want to write about it. I'm going to give you some thoughts on that. Before I do, I just want to see if Sunny or Sue had anything that you wanted to bring up that we haven't talked about on this. Sue, was there anything that you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, to me, I found that when you are writing about an event, you are actually reliving it. For instance, my mum died last year, and I've told lots of people about it. They've asked me questions, and I've basically given them bullet points. This happened, that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. I've not said, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I was so cold and the nurses put a blanket around me. I've not gone into all the little tiny details, but it's those tiny details that bring that back to life for me. And when I'm writing, I can include those. I don't want to bore people. We've all been there. People say, "How are you?" And you go, "Oh, I'm fine." You don't say, "Oh, well, actually, I've been feeling a bit depressed." So when we tell people about traumatic events, we do tend to just give them the highlights, the edited highlights. But when you write, it's a bit like speaking with a counsellor. You will bring out every thought that you had, everything you saw, everything you heard, everything you felt. And you can also find that when you're writing something and you think, oh, I didn't even remember until I started writing that happened, or I didn't remember that that's how I felt.
Mm.
That's a great point.
It's interesting how it starts to come out like that. When you write, Sue, just out of curiosity, how long do you usually write for? Do you have a specific time, or is it based on what you're writing, or how you're feeling, or what is this? What is that like for you?
It's probably a mixture of all things because I'm often busy and I think I can only spare half an hour to write. But if I've got plenty of time, if that's not an option, I just write until it feels like I need to stop. And I was writing about my dad's death, and that was 2003. So it was a long time ago, but writing about it really brought it back to life as if it was yesterday. And I was writing it in Jambios, and I've been writing for a while, and I started to feel upset. And I thought, well, this wasn't what this was about. I didn't want to feel upset. I just wanted to remember. And I expect a few tears, but I'm actually starting to feel like this is really upsetting me now. And I wanted to step back from it, but I didn't want to step back totally. I didn't want to go off and, clean the windows or read a book or something. I wanted to stay in that thing, thinking about my dad. So I just went through the questions that Monty sets. One of the questions was, what did your dad like to cook? And I remembered that my dad in the 70s had this thing where he liked to experiment with food colorings. So we'd have blue scrambled eggs, black cakes with red icing, and that made me laugh. So I wrote about that for a little bit. So I was still in that frame of reference. I was still there with my dad, but I'd taken a step back from the pain. So I found that really helped me. And that's one of the things I like about Jambios. You can just, move on to something else, but still continue to write.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way that you recognized that it was becoming a little bit too much in the moment, and you gave yourself permission to take that break, stay in the space of your dad, but look at it from some of the fun and happy parts of it, and giving you that ability to then go back to the deeper moments later.
Yeah.
I actually think I did write very detached for a long time because all the books and everything, it was coming from the place of detachment, because although they were my feelings, I was putting them on characters that I created so that I personally wouldn't have to deal with the pain that I had dealt with. It was only when I really was like, no, I have to heal because it's affecting things around me, and it was affecting my children and my marriage and things like that, that I was able to really start writing. And, a little, very similar to Sue in some ways, but I would think the thing that was different for me is that, man, I would write to the point of where I would be choking on tears because I would be crying so hard and really dealing with the things I had dealt with in the past because I had never been able to set them aside before. So it was really, like I know this is probably a bad term and probably not the best thing to say during a webinar, but it would be like I had to emotionally vomit all that stuff in order to get it out, in order to begin to feel better. And so for me with writing, not so much 3 or 4 sessions all the time, but it would always, I wouldn't just write for 20 minutes. Sometimes I would write until I was done, until I felt, no, this is it. This is all I need to say about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we deal with the emotions that come up as you're writing. And the researchers do put out a caution that if writing about whatever, if you feel a little bit unhinged, that it might take you too far to a place that's going to require, a physician to be careful. So I kind of like hearing how you guys handle it and sort of take a break. And I know for me, I use humor while I'm writing, which sounds a little bit weird, but even if I'm writing about something that scared me or hurt me or whatever, I always tell the story in kind of a funny way. And I guess that's that's my defense mechanism, but I'm
Right.
able to blend in kind of the deep emotion, and then with the humor part, that just allows me to kind of go through the whole story.
Well, there is a lot of humor and pain, as strange as that sounds. But like my cousin Tanya and I, we talk about my mom all the time, and the truth is my mom was a nutcase, but we have so many funny stories about those times that we do find ourselves laughing. So I'm with you. I like to put that humor into stuff too when I'm writing.
Yeah. Okay, so I promised that I would give you some ideas to help you with what you write about, because it is hard sometimes when you're new to this and you sit down and you open up your Jam Bio and you go to the section on whatever you're going to write about, and you're like, okay, 20 minutes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to just pour my heart out, and you don't know what to do or what to say. So I thought that this was a great list that again, comes from the professionals, and they put this out there of different things. And these are just ideas. You don't have to do exactly this, but this can start your thinking of what you want to write about. So starting with describing the situation is always, of course, the obvious place, but also to get to that kind of emotional aspect of how you felt when it occurred. You can see on here how you feel about it now, how it affected your life. Did it affect your life? What did that mean to you? Did you learn anything from it? Did you lose anything? Did you gain anything? How did it impact you? And how about for the future? What does it mean to you in terms of your future? Again, these are just some ideas, but I think it's a nice starting point to help you with that. Any thoughts on that, Sue, in regard to what to write?
I just think it just comes to you, what you want to write about. So then I just start saying, this was I set the scene to myself, I remember on this particular day, for instance, when I wrote about my dad, I started off saying I was sat in front of the television and I was watching Coronation Street. It was an English soap, and then the phone rang. So I could have told it chronologically, and as I went through every step of writing exactly what happened, I said, and this is how I felt. I don't think I really wrote much about how it affected me now until like the very end. I'm still, although I do creative writing, I'm still in a bit of that academic frame of mind where you put your conclusion at the end. So I kind of, I wrote my feelings down, I wrote what had happened, how I felt about it, and then I saved my thoughts about it until I'd finished how it affected my life, what I learned because of it, and how I felt about it now. But for the rest of it, I just told it as a chronological story.
I think chronological is a way, our brains sometimes are structured like that, and we just want to go from beginning to end. And other times it's what's most important to us, and then we kind of backtrack. So really whatever you feel works for you would be great. I turned the screen back because I saw that somebody did throw a question in here just asking me to do so. So that gives me a reminder, if anybody does want to share anything, feel free to go ahead and type in there, and I can read what you have to say. If you want, I can open you up and you can speak, but we're glad to hear your questions. We're glad to hear what you've experienced in regard to therapeutic writing. So feel free to type in. It's a little difficult looking at the questions while I'm also looking at the screens, but I'll do my best to do so. Okay, Janique, I'm going to move on to the next screen here, so I hope you're done with this screen. She says yes. This is fun. Okay, to share or not to share? I is a really great question because I think we had it up on one of those screens and I didn't go into it about how, I should have, and I'm sorry I didn't, about how the research shows that you can delete what you've written. You can rip it out, you can write it, and you can pour out your heart and soul onto the screen or the paper or the Word document, and you can rip that paper up when you finish and get those benefits. Or if you want to share, you can do so as well. I do want to go to the next screen here, which lets you know, again, I'm the research part. These other two ladies are the practical side of real life stuff. But it's definitely clear that it's up to you. And there are pros and cons to both. And I think we're going to hear a little bit from our guests in regard to their experience with sharing. So why don't we move on to that, because I find that to be really interesting. Both Sue and Sunshine, I'm going to say it in particularly related to the JamBIOS activity we had with this the memory of the week. Thank you. There's a memory of the week, and it was really, it was originally meant to be just kind of fun, and that's what we thought at JamBIOS. Would just be kind of like a fun thing, and I remember Henry Cusick was saying like, oh, your first kiss, or he was giving people ideas of things to write about, and we didn't think that much of it. And then what we saw was that there were actually people were writing a lot of deep emotional items, and I guess I'll start with Sue as our winner of that activity.
Right.
If you could maybe share what your experience with that was, because we were actually surprised when you shared such a deep story.
Yeah. Well, I shared about my drug addiction many years ago and my subsequent recovery. So I typed it all up into my JamBIOS, and then I hovered over pressing send, and then I sent it, and I had this feeling, of, oh my God, what have I just done? And I thought, well, I can just message Ian. He's the only person who's seen it, and I can say, don't put this on Facebook. And then I thought, no, come on, be honest, let people see it. And then it was chosen as one of the contenders, and I thought, well, in order to win this competition, which I really wanted to win, I've got to get as many Facebook likes. I was working at the time within criminal justice, doing my job of working in substance misuse, but I was working in probation officers alongside probation officers, and a lot of my friends on Facebook were probation officers, and they had no idea about my past whatsoever. And I thought, I'm just going to message a few people who already know this and say, well, will you like my story? And I thought, no, I'm going to put it out on Facebook. And you know what? If someone reads it and is going to judge me, then that's their problem. I've moved on if they can't see me for who I am now. But it was still really scary. And then what totally just took my breath away was I was getting all these messages from people saying, Sue, all the time I've known you and I never knew this about you. I'm so proud of you and so proud to know you. Well done. You've done amazing. And it was literally bringing tears to my eyes, reading people's comments. So for me, obviously it's up to the individual whether you want to share, but I would say if you can, share it, because it was like I hadn't even realised I've been carrying this around like a bit of a weight on my shoulders, for 30 odd years. And all of a sudden, that weight had gone. And now, I'll tell anyone that listens, I was a heroin addict, because it's now become something to me that, it's a story I am who I am because of my stories. And you should be proud of your stories, no matter how harrowing they might be. It's good to share, and it's good to get that feedback.
Yeah,
I agree.
Thank you for sharing that with us, because the response that you got was really tremendous, and it's wonderful to hear that it impacted you like that. Sunny?
I actually have a question. Sue, is your story up on the shelf in case anybody wants to read it?
Yes, it is, yes.
On the shelf. I was just saying, just in case anybody they get curious and is like, well, maybe let's what they read and then or what they wrote, and then maybe it would help them when they start their own therapeutic journey.
Yeah, so, and it's called taking off the blanket.
Taking off the blanket. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, if you're registered, and it's all free platform, on Jam Bios, there's an area called the Shelf, well, the community bookshelf, we affectionately call the Shelf.
Right.
And you can share kind of with the Jam Bios group any of your sections. You don't have to do all of them, but you can pick whichever ones you want to. And Susan's up there, so thanks for mentioning that. Do you want to quickly tell your story with sharing? And then I do want to talk about how this works, like what works. And I do see we also have
Are questions coming in?
yeah, I have a question here. I hear some people are seeming to be having problems with not getting the audio. So I don't know who's hearing us and who's not hearing us.
That's disappointing. We will have a recording up, though.
Well, they can't hear us anyway.
Right. No, but if
but we will.
is knowing that, then
Yes.
we could just mention it that we will have that. So I have two stories on the shelf that I didn't think I'd ever share, and one is titled Brent, the story I wasn't going to share, and it's under my name, Sunshine Cowger, and you will find it there. And then the other one is called The Best Friend I Never Knew, and that one's about Robin Williams, but about how losing him felt like losing my brother all over again, and how that was a very emotional time for me. So when it came to Memory of the Week, I thought I had already written it, just didn't think I'd share it. I just never thought in a million years that I would ever share that. And there was only like two people in my life who had ever known the truth behind Brent's death. People always assume he was just sick and he died, but then when they realize that my mother had so much to do with that, it becomes a whole different thing. And there's things in your family sometimes you just don't talk about. And so when I when I chose to share it for Memory of the Week, the feedback was pretty astounding. Like I was so moved because I had always been so ashamed for the things my mother had done. Because as we grow up, we're always hearing, you look like your mom, you look like your dad. So you just assume in some ways that there's other things about you that are like them as well. And so for me to get all this love and feedback, and tell me that, that I was my own kind of warrior for never giving up, that was huge to me. I had a friend, my friend Michelle from elementary school. We were in speech therapy together, like 7 years old, I believe. And I remember her going, and now we're in her 40s, and she was like, how did I not know this? Like, how did I not know? She said, no wonder why you were always snappy with your mom. Like, it's all those things, but sharing it was probably the biggest weight that was ever taken off my shoulders, but I don't want to get into that right now. But it was really huge for me to finally share that, and it helped me to not feel ashamed anymore, because my brother and I were victims. I have chosen to overcome and not be a victim anymore. But truthfully, it just helped me to really get past it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, research shows you don't have to share. So
right.
I love hearing these stories of how the sharing has helped, but for those who are not comfortable with that, that's fine too. I'm seeing on my little list here of questions and written in notes, some are hearing audio, some are not, or hearing audio but not video. So apologies for the lovely GoToWebinar interface, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And someone here has set their program settings to get their audio, so great. Janique, who's been so great here, has typed something in here about an experience. Janique, are you open and cool with me trying to open your microphone and seeing if you can share what you wrote here or something that you do? I don't know if you have a microphone or if you only have speakers, but oh, she says sure. All right, let's try this.
Cool.
We haven't done it before, so bear with us, but I'm going to go ahead and open Janique's microphone. Janique, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. Hello.
Yes, thank you for participating in this. And you wrote something interesting here on your note about music, and I was wondering if you could share that.
Sure. I've actually been working on my own therapeutic piece, and going back to the event. The event took place, I would say, when I was about maybe 13 years old. So that would have been in the mid 80s. And so for me to go back and do the research and to really conjure the feelings and to really relive it, one of the things that I would do is go and research all the current events and what was going on during that time, as well as getting all of the music that was happening. And so I have this huge, massive playlist, and just listening to those music, just listening to that music, just sort of uh, instantly brings me back to, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember this. I remember that. So it helps put me in the mood, I guess. Helps sort of put me in the environment of where I was. So.
That is fascinating. And Sunshine is sitting here.
I'm nodding along with you, like, I
Yeah.
think that's fabulous.
What a great way to kind of take yourself back there, because boy, music, I'll have to research that now, but music has that direct connection to your brain.
Right.
And I'm sure when we look at it, that it somehow stimulates certain parts of the brain. And we're going to be talking about the brain in just a minute, in our last 10 minutes here, of how that actually works. So thank you for sharing, Janique.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close you off here for a moment. Okay, let me get back to my screen here. Bear with me. I'm trying to do too many things at once, and I'm not the best multitasker. Okay, so how does it work? I don't know if you folks on the call are interested in this or not, but for me, I like to really dig in and see, well, how does this work? You're telling me it works, but I need to hear how it works. And there are a lot of different theories, but the one that seems to have the most credibility, science-based, that I think is going to make a lot of sense once you hear it, even though it is a bit scientific, technical. But here goes. I'll do my best to put it in very simple terms. So here's what happens is when we experience something traumatic, within our brains, it actually activates certain parts of our brains that deal with emotions and senses. Okay, so those parts of our brain are triggered and they're firing, and we know this to be true because they can see it in the MRIs and all of this kind of stuff. So what we're getting in our brain from the trauma is not actually the course of events, but we're getting the emotion and the senses. Okay, so hold that thought. Then we have to understand about memory, and there's two forms of memory. There's working memory and there's stored memory. And working memory is what you're using all the time to do whatever you're doing. And stored memory is where once we kind of have something, we understand it, we know it, it becomes rote, we can stick it in stored memory and activate it later when we need it. Working memory takes up a lot of our brain power. We store things so that we can free up that working memory, or we can free up our brain to do what it needs to do. So even like you might find yourself, sometimes stored memory is when you find yourself, sometimes maybe you've experienced where you're driving and you don't even realize when you get to where you're going, you don't even know how you got there. It's because you were using all the stuff stored away, stored memory. Your brain could just work unconsciously and take care of it. So with your traumatic experiences and them being emotion and senses in your brain, they stay in your working memory. They are constantly in your working memory. You just don't know it. Even if you're not thinking about it at that time, they have not yet been stored away. And the most remarkable thing that the researchers have learned is that language and structure and mostly narrative story turns the sensory, the emotion, into something solid that your brain can then store, set away, set apart, and free up that working memory to do what it needs to do.
It kind of reminds me of like when my computer is running slow, which funny enough, it just shut down on me. But anyway, it reminds me of when my computer runs slow and I have to put it through something to free up everything that is going on with the computer. And then suddenly, once it does that, my computer runs better. Everything is back on track. It doesn't take me as long to save something or move something or whatever. And I think it's the same thing with our brains, that as we're freeing that up, I feel like we begin to work better. We begin to be able to stay on task and focus, and even our bodies, as you said in the beginning, to begin to heal. We're not dealing with all those nasty sick things because we're getting rid of so much stuff.
To me, it actually, because I was so skeptical about lung function and irritable bowel, and like, how could that have anything to do with writing? I just couldn't understand it until I learned this, because when you learn this, all of a sudden you realize that your brain is the control center for everything. And if your brain is tied up doing whatever, worrying about subconsciously handling all of the sensory emotions, then presumably it's not going to be at its peak for handling all these other things. And I'm going to turn it over to Sue to share. I know you do a lot of work with mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a great believer in getting the things, even non-emotional things, even things like when you feel overwhelmed because you've got so much to do, putting it down in a list, getting it organized. So it's the same with anything emotional, any trauma that's happened. It's a bit like what you're saying, turning the sensory experience into something solid. Until you've done that, it's a bit like trying to catch hold of water, because there's so many different streams of thought just running through your head, and you can't catch that all together and put it away because you can't get it all in one solid amount. But when you write it down, you get all those thoughts onto the paper. As it says, it does become something solid, and it clears from the subconscious. I mean, we tend to think that our conscious minds are in control, but it's like that thing about the iceberg, only that little part that shows above the water, that's our conscious mind. The depths of the subconscious go on, forever. So we tend to kind of think that our subconscious mind isn't really that important. But really, that is driving our lives. That is affecting everything that we do. And there is this huge mind-body connection. I do a lot of yoga and mindfulness, and I find that really quietens my mind down. But if you've still got, things that have happened that you need to deal with, you're never going to quite find that peace of mind. And if you haven't got a peace of mind, you're not going to be 100% well. And often, you've got something wrong with you, and it's psychosomatic, which isn't to say you're imagining this. It's not to dismiss maybe the very real pain that you may be feeling, but it is connected with something that's happened in your life that you haven't dealt with.
Yeah, really good stuff. So true. And I do want to reiterate that third bullet on there about language and structure and narrative, because I'm not exactly sure, and the researchers aren't sure why the language and the structure and the narrative turn it solid, but it does. And the narrative, the stories matter. In the form of a story is really important to get the maximum benefit. They actually did one study where, it's kind of funny, they had people write, some people did narrative and other people did as a haiku. You know what a haiku is, everybody? Yes, I do. So, and they had them do it in that structure. And the effects were minimal compared to the narrative. So there's something about how we have evolved where stories create meaning for our brain. Our brains know how to handle stories and narratives. So I just wanted to really stress that point. We're going to be wrapping up, and on our wrap up here, we had said in our invitation to the webinar that we were going to tell you the singularly most important thing to write about. And what is that one thing? So y'all can be thinking in your head what that might be, or write down what you think it is, and then I'm going to tell you the answer. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Okay, are you ready? The singularly most important thing to write about is, drum roll please. It's your secrets. It is your secrets. And I think that's just such a great way to think about it. Of all of a sudden, I think we all can think about like, oh, yes, this is the secret that I don't share with many people, any people, whatever. Those are the things, if you explore them in a narrative structure, will provide you the most benefit. Okay, we are going to wrap up here. Oh, Janique gave us a little drum roll there.
Oh, nice.
We're going to have to invite Janique to all of our webinars.
Yes, we'll do that.
We've been taking some questions or information along the way. We're at the top of the hour, so I think I'm actually going to close up here because I don't want you folks to have to sit here for more than an hour listening to us to chat on. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for your interest in this topic. Hope you'll explore Jam Bios as something both for your fun memories and your fun family stories, as well as perhaps some of the stuff that we're talking about today. I'd like to thank Sue, our wonderful guest from the UK. Thank you so much for joining us. Sunshine, as always, thank you for your brilliant observations. And we will see y'all at the next webinar.
Yep, happy jam bioing.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.